1, 2, 3. Welcome to She Rocked It. This is the place where ladies are talking about the ways we're blazing our trails and the things that put the wind in our sails.
She Rocked It is a podcast and virtual community dedicated to celebrating and elevating the voices of women. I'm Karen Gross, and as a professional writer and singer for the past 2 decades, I've come to know the power of the voice to connect, inform, and inspire us. On this podcast, I'm pulling back the curtain on the lives of trailblazing women who reveal how they've raised their voices and rocked it across many professional fields. Ready to rock? Let's go. Hey, rock stars. Thanks so much for tuning into the She Rocked It podcast. And I cannot believe that we are already winding down on our first season. It has been such an incredible journey to share these stories with you. And a big thank you for being part of it, being part of this community. And also a big thanks to all of the women who've gotten on the mic with me this past season to share their trailblazing journeys and inspire all of us so very much. So to those of you listening on your podcast platforms, or if you're tuning in on YouTube, thank you for being with us. And please don't hesitate to leave us a comment, a review. Please subscribe so that we can continue to stay in touch with you as we launch our second season in the not too distant future. And also just let us know what you think of this past season, because your feedback means so much to me. It's so affirming as we continue to grow the She Rocked It community. So today we have such an amazing conversation. I know you're going to be inspired when you hear from Sonia De Los Santos, who is an incredible musician who came to the U.S. Really not knowing anyone. She came from her hometown in Mexico to pursue her dream of being a singer. And within a few years, she was touring with Dan Zanes, the Grammy-winning children's musical performer. And a few years after that, she had launched some of her own solo albums into the world. Most recently, she's launched a wonderful record called Esperanza, which is hope, a message of hope. And it's a perfect record for this moment, not only for children, but definitely for grown-ups as well. Sonia is a Latin Grammy nominee. Her last record, Alegría, was nominated for a Latin Grammy Award, and she continues to perform and tour in some incredible places. She's been seen at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Austin City Limits, Lollapalooza. Yes, that's right. So you're not going to want to miss this conversation and hear how Sonia continues to raise her voice and rock it in amazing ways. Sonia, welcome. Mucho gusto.
Muchas gracias. Thanks for welcoming to your show.
De nada. And I'm so happy that you're here with us on She Rocked It. And so many things that I want to ask you about today. First and foremost, tell me a little bit about how you got started performing children's music. You just released a new album called Esperanza, which means hope. And goodness knows, don't we need some of that right now? So tell us a little bit about how you got to this moment, releasing this record and starting to raise your voice in the world of children's music.
Yeah, so long story, but we have some time, right?
We do. And I'm very keen to hear it straight from you.
Well, it's thanks for the space and letting me share a little bit of my story. Yeah, I grew up singing just, at home with my mom, with my family, just casually, nothing professional. And then
home for you was
home
Mexico.
For me, Mexico, Monterrey. I was born and raised in the city of Monterrey in Mexico. And I, since a very early age, I knew I wanted to sing. I wanted to act. I started playing a little bit of guitar. I did musical theater. And then I moved to New York City to study a summer workshop at a theater school here. And after that, I was like, that's it. I have to be here. I have to be near the theaters. And I don't know. I just felt a very deep connection with the city and decided to move and try to find work. A lot, some time went by, and then I was very lucky to audition for a band called Dan Zanes And Friends in 2007. And he had just won a Grammy the year before, and he decided to make an album in Spanish with celebrating the Latino cultures that exist in New York City. And the album is called Nueva York, and he was looking for a singer whose first language was Spanish, but could also do bilingual things. So anyway, I joined his band. I started playing music with him, and the band traveled all across the United States, went to different countries. And that was like, the inspiration behind really starting my own project for children and families years later.
That's amazing. And wow, you did an amazing job summarizing that. And I think it was like 2 minutes. And I know there was a lot of life that happened in those years. So that was amazing. And I'm a singer myself, actually. And I really think that following the life and the calling of a performer and a singer is a particularly brave choice because, artists don't always get the support of society, which pushes us towards more predictable, let's say, traditional types of careers. And I'm just curious, it sounds like you had a pretty clear vision of what you wanted to do from a young age, even coming to New York City, being a performer. But I still think it's a really brave thing to do. So tell me a little more about that courage and how you really followed your calling.
It was not easy. It was really not easy. But you're right. I had a pretty clear idea of where I wanted to be. I didn't know exactly what I was going to end up doing as a life career or anything specific. But I knew I wanted to be surrounded by music, and I knew that I had a calling to come to New York. Actually, since after high school, I wanted to move here when I was like 18, and my parents were like, no, you're not going to go to a different country by yourself. Go to college here. We'll support you. And then if you want to go after that, then we'll support you too. And so I went to college in Mexico, and I had a great time. I still, I was doing theater and taking lessons and giving singing lessons to younger people. And all of that, I think, formed me and gave me the courage to say, all right, now I'm prepared. I can always fall back on my, I did a degree in communications, so I know a little bit about production and journalism and a little bit.
We are similar in that way because my other life is communications. I love it.
There it is. I'm like, all right, I can always go back home and try to find a job at a news station or, whatever it is, or producing TV or film. And
you kind of need those skills in certain ways as a singer. You have to sometimes write your web copy and, write a press release if you need to, right?
I can't tell you how much it has helped, obviously. So we're talking about courage. I felt like I had the tools that I needed at that time. I was also very lucky. We haven't talked about language because I grew up speaking Spanish, obviously in Mexico, but I grew up also learning English as a second language. But I did move here, I was fluent, but I think I've gotten a little bit better. I'm not 100% there, but I was able to communicate, and I was able to go and look for a job, and other people don't have that possibility of getting to another country and already speaking the language. So I feel pretty lucky in that sense, and I understand that privilege. But having said that, the other part was really hard because I didn't know many people here. I just had one friend, really, and no family. So,
wow.
It has.
New York can be, having lived there myself, can be welcoming at times and also pretty tough at times.
Yeah.
Were there any major, challenges that you want to share that you faced coming here as someone who, yes, was still coming to know the language and the culture?
I was cold all the time in the winter. I learned how to wear a hat and thick socks and boots and.
Yes, and you're still in New York, right?
Yeah, I technically live in New Jersey. I live in Weehawken, across the Hudson.
Oh,
River.
right across the, yeah.
Yeah, but I see New York City from the window, so I feel like I'm part of New York, and I'm in New York City all the time. But so that's one thing, and the other one is just being the challenge is just learning how to become an adult and be independent in a different country, starting from zero. Right after college. It's, with no guaranteed job, I had to work on my, get my immigration status in line and get an artist visa and all of that. And that was really challenging. But I'm proud that I made that. Yeah.
That's incredible. I think it's just tremendous. And along the way, getting to that audition with Dan Zanes, were you gigging? Were you playing around New York? Were you doing crazy gigs and jobs and, I don't know, doing what artists do in New York? Or how was that for you as you kind of work towards your big break?
Yeah, my first job in New York was coat check at a Mexican restaurant for tips. Obviously, I didn't get paid. I couldn't get paid, actually. And so that was my first job. And then I was bartending for a while. And I one day happened to walk around, close to Port Authority in New York City. And I saw this duo, these two guys with a guitar sitting like at a window at a bar. I was like, they sound really cool. And I went inside. And I ended up talking to them. And I'm like, I'm a singer. And then like, why don't you come up and sing? And I sang. I don't remember what I sang, but, long story short, they invited me to sing with them every Wednesday, I think, there. So that was my only singing gig for a while. So when Dan Zanes called, I was like, what? I don't need to bartend anymore. And I still, when I could, I did the Wednesday gigs, but that's it. That's all the crazy gigs I've done.
That's beautiful. And it's just like sometimes that fateful magic happenstance kind of situation where you walk in, it's like that. You just have to follow your nose sometimes. Sometimes you can't plan these things. You just heard something, it called to you, and but then that was, I'm sure, great practice and took you to that next step in your life.
Totally.
So
and
amazing.
it got me really also connected to American music and folk music. And I didn't know that all of that was going to be helpful than joining a band that did folk music, American folk music. It's been quite a journey, but it feels like every little thing you learn in life, then it shows up in a different way when you're like, oh, I'm glad I was exposed to this in this way. So now it's helpful in this other scenario. So
I think that's such a great lesson. And it's a lesson that I remind myself of all the time, that even if something maybe doesn't go right in my life or something happens that I totally wasn't expecting, it's all part of the journey. It's all going to inform your next step or, where you're supposed to go. So thank you for sharing that. And fast forward to this moment, you are now a Latin Grammy nominee. You have toured all around and just released this amazing album, Esperanza, which I've been listening to this week. And it is just, like you said, it's a fusion of folk, of music from I'm sure, your roots. And it's just got so much vibrancy and heart to it. So tell us a little bit about what inspired this latest record that you've released.
Thank you for listening, first of all. I feel
my gosh, I've been dancing to it.
Yay!
In my apartment.
Yay!
Totally. And like I said, truly, I mean, Esperanza, we need hope. It's been such a tough time in the world, of late. So it just seems like you're doing your part in trying to uplift us and keep our spirits up, really.
Yeah. I'm glad that translated. That's it, really. It's just, we've had some time during this past, I don't know how many months, but to really, to me, to step back and sort of I felt like I needed some space to look back to what I had accomplished, when everything fell apart and I'm like, now I'm home, what do? I don't have a work, where do I start, right? And I'm obviously not the only person. This happened to everyone, but each one of us has a different way of coping with it. It was just a way of saying, all right, I'm going to write these songs. I've been enjoying nature, so I wrote a song about chipmunks, for example, because I would see them whenever we went to a little lake and put our hammocks up. And then just songs that made me... that had something to do with being grateful and being hopeful and imagining a brighter, better future ahead. But like I said, it's just a personal way of coping with some solitude and quiet times, which are so important too. But it was a lot of that. So the music had to be made, and I'm really happy how the album came out. It's 12 original songs, original lyrics, original music. There's a lot of melodies. There's a lot of instruments, different instrumentations, from more regional Mexican music to cumbia from Colombia. There's funk. There's more singer-songwriter song called "This Land Is Also Mine" that has has a whole other charge. But still, it has influences from the American folk music that I also I've been able to be exposed to here in the U.S.
Yeah, and This Land Is Also Mine, which you just mentioned. We talk about raising our voices. It sounds like that, and having heard the song, that's a moment where you got to really raise your voice from your heart and from your experience. So tell us a little more about raising your voice through that song in particular.
Yeah, I feel like it's I feel the need to share some of my story. I think art is a great way of, getting to know people around you and connecting to those parts that sometimes, when you hear a song, you're like, that's how I feel. She put it in a way that I really connect to it. In my story, it's very personal, but I think it's also universal. I'm an immigrant in this country, and I have to say, the great majority of people I've encountered here have treated me so well, and they have been very welcoming, and I've had so many opportunities to grow and to use my voice, right? Thanks to, the doors that have opened. But some other people, they're just not happy that I sing in Spanish, or that I am who I am, or I don't know what it is. But so that particular song came after a hateful comment in one of my videos in a platform there. And, the words came. I sat on a plane after a tour, and I wrote. I remember I just had this. It had been building up, and that was just what brought everything together. And that's where it comes from. And I think it's important to also, if I sing for younger people, it's fine. There are a lot of the families who listen to my music are first, second generation immigrant families, or they know a neighbor who comes from a different country. And it's a message that I want to put out there, saying, welcome your neighbors and support them in any way you can.
Thank you so much for sharing that kind of behind the scenes journey on how that song came to life, from your heart and from an unfortunate experience, which you turned into something positive and beautiful that families can now treasure and learn from. And yeah, it's interesting because I think when you put children's music out into the world, it's interesting, your demographic is really the next generation, really.
Exactly.
So you're in a way teaching them about acceptance and love for your neighbor and hope. And is that something you consciously decided to do? You're like, I want to create music for young people, or was it more just this is the kind of music that I feel like doing, and it just so happens to be appropriate for families? Like, how did that choice come to be?
It's both, actually. I really enjoy playing this music. Like, there's not a song in that album or in any concert that we play that I'm like, oh, I don't like this song. Or I just do it because it's for kids. Or, no, if you listen to our music, I mean, many parents are like, I can hardly call this like just children's music. The idea is that it's a shared experience with families. And that, in that album, there's some more kiddie quote unquote song, and you hear kids' voices, but then there's a song that's a lot more sober, that talks a little bit more deep about racism, for example, or not feeling welcomed here. So I am very, 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 and I don't say it lightly, very conscious of the role I have and how I am being perceived by younger people. And I think it's very important to just share and plant those little seeds that can turn into conversations after a show, and saying, Mom, did you see that Sonia is from Mexico and she speaks another language? And she welcomed her friend who looked completely different from her on stage. And they seem to be getting along playing music. So those small messages, I think, are very, very important in creating a new generation of people who are ultimately better humans and better citizens. So everything's intentional. Everything is. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much again for sharing your perspective on that. And I'm curious, because you came to the U.S. knowing hardly anyone, were there any women along your path who inspired you? You know, we talk about in the She Rocked It world how much women lean on one another and support one another and have this strong network of referring jobs to one another, or, you know, you should talk to this person or that person. I'm just curious, in your own path, were there any women who kind of helped to guide you or light the way or connect you with opportunities?
Yes, so many of them. And I would start with my own mother, because she, even though she's not here with me, she lives in Mexico. She has been so encouraging of me following my dreams. She has been, the best cheerleader you could think of. She likes it. She says, "I'm proud of you. Keep going. You got this," and that's very important. And then here in the U.S. in New York, just managers, for example. There's a woman, a very special woman called Irene Cabrera. She's an agent. She's a booking agent. She books talent, and she was working with Dan Zanes when I met Dan, and she found me. She was the one who found me and brought me to Dan, and she completely changed my life. So I'm really grateful to her, and she's just one of them. And now I'm surrounded by a great group of women, my booking agent, my, PR, other female musicians, my friends. I have a group of friends who, some of them do children's music and some of them do just other kinds of music, other styles. And we're recommending one another for things. And we call each other, how did you do this? How do you got this? Do you understand these royalties? Was this appropriate or not? What do you think? Like, I feel like we have so much to share with one another, and we need women's voices. We need them. We have to be represented there. And if I shared my story, maybe someone's listening and saying, all right, I'm going to follow my dream. That's inspiring. And so we ultimately inspire one another. And if we help one another, then, the next generation's going to do much better than where we are. And I think we've come a long way. But I think there's still glass ceilings that we can break.
Amen. And I love hearing you have this collective of women in your team. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And thanks to Stephanie Meyer for connecting us, by the way.
Yes. She's one of them.
She's one of them.
Yeah.
Let's give a little shout out to Stephanie Meyer, who's your publicist. And I just love that you have all these women in your corner who are furthering your voice, helping further your voice. Yeah.
So many of them. And you know what? I feel like 100%. It's important that you trust the people who speak on your behalf. I wouldn't want someone who I don't respect to speak on my behalf or talk about my album or try to get me a show. And just to feel the support of other people who believe in what you do. It's so rewarding. And I just feel the warmth, especially not having my family here. I feel like all of those people, that collective is part of my family.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious why you feel it's particularly important for women to raise their voices and rock it as you do.
Well, we need more voices. We need more women's voices, and we need more diverse women's voices. People from every part of the world, from different art disciplines. Just talking about art, and raising our voice for art. And it's something that my mom also taught me. She said, if you're going to use your voice, use it for something good. And while you're at it, make sure you turn back when you're in a place where you can help somebody else, and use your voice then to bring somebody else to the step where you are. And we sometimes forget about that. We have a little bit of success in something, and then you're like, oh, I made it here and I made it here. And if you don't look behind you and see who else is in line and who else is working hard to be where you are, doesn't matter where it is. It could be any kind of job. I think it's more fulfilling for our lives, feeling useful in using other women achieve their dreams. So important.
Wow. I could not agree more with that. And I'm just curious, how does it feel, or how did it feel when you got your Grammy nomination for your previous record, which was Alegría? Was it just like a pinch me moment?
I was so excited. I had no idea that it was going to happen. And I'm glad I was in New York City, and I rode the subway, and I was like, I can't believe this. This is so great. And just feeling the support from my peers was, and it still is a beautiful, beautiful feeling.
That's amazing. I feel your joy. I could see you just dancing in the subway.
We were crazy, yeah.
Oh my God, exactly what you need to be doing. Just what a joyful moment. Oh my gosh. So I know you just released an amazing show, or actually in the past year or so, you rolled out a really great series on YouTube called En Casa con Sonia. And it's just, again, so uplifting, these little, I want to say 5 or 6 minute moments with you in your home, actually where you're sitting now, where you perform. So you've transitioned to the virtual world that we all have to exist on these days. But tell us about some other ways that you've been sharing your voice of late.
Yeah, when everything shut down, actually, I didn't know what to do. And I for a few weeks, I was just like, I don't know what's next. I had barely played without a band, for example. It was something that it was a big challenge for me to just grab the guitar and turn on the camera. I'm like, I had to sing. I had to connect. I had to do something. So that's why I started En Casa con Sonia. And I started getting requests, actually, from the theaters who had booked me for the whole year and could not have me there, saying, would she record a concert by herself? And so I got a lot of work, actually, last year.
That's great. That's wonderful. You could continue to share your voice.
Yes.
And you had to learn how to do that, though. That's not always easy to transition, like you said, to being a solo artist and to figure out the recording software and all this.
Yeah, gear and just singing here in my living room, but it was really fun. It was also a challenge. I had the time for it, and I'm glad I was able to connect with families in that way. I'm still here writing songs and trying to be creative and thinking about what's coming next, but actually also just kind of taking in the moment of having put out this record and just seeing how it sits with people and talking about it. It takes a chunk of time too.
And I always like to leave our listeners with a question about how they can rock it. One tip that they can learn from you as to how they can rock it in their careers and callings. So what's one tip that you would want to leave with us today?
I think finding your own voice. Find what's unique about you. We all have a different voice. We all have a very unique voice. And what's yours? Where do you feel more useful? Where do you feel like you can bring more to the table, to your community, starting with your neighbors, with your town, with the people who you see at the park. Find your own voice, and then follow what feels good in your heart and in your gut. And that's what I did, and I think it's important to take some time. Sometimes we don't really know what we want to do, and that's okay. That takes time, and you can try different things and see what works and what people react to, and in time that can turn into a lifelong career or a lifelong thing you want to do. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for this beautiful message and music of hope that you continue to share with us. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey as it evolves into the future. It's just been such a pleasure to get to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you too. This has been great. And thanks for having this space for women to share their stories. I think it's so important. And I look forward to hearing more of these episodes.
Thanks so much for tuning into the She Rocked It podcast. I'm your host, Karen Gross. This episode has been produced by Tori Marchioni and Jake Siegelbaum, with audio engineering by Teng Chen. The She Rocked It theme song is by Karen Gross and Tim Motzer. I invite you to join us on Instagram at She Rocked It and join our Rockstar Network at SheRockedIt.com. We hope you'll add your voice to the conversation because at She Rocked It, we are dedicated to raising the volume on women's voices.
She rocked